Hi everyone, today we are moving on to a new perspective on personality, the humanistic perspective, which hopefully you remember is the one with the pyramid, and you have to reach each level before rising up to become essentially self-actualized, to know yourself the best. It's going to go very quickly because we've already reviewed this perspective and there's not really much anything new in it. So to review, you focus on your conscious experience, what you think and feel, and the individual's freedom to choose, and how well you can grow as a person. The perspective itself needs to study healthy people, so you can't understand how people become healthy and happy unless you're looking at people who already are, which can cause an issue in terms of how much research is done on this, because you have to get funding in order to do research, and most people don't want to donate money to find out why people are happy. They want to donate money to find out how to help unhappy people become happy. It studies everything that's relevant to the human condition, not just observable behavior. So it's not just about the person and how they're acting at the moment. You're going to look at everything. So what their family life is like, what their friends are like, how they are in social situations, everything around the person. It's very holistic. So on to the next slide. Hopefully you remember that Abraham Maslow was the one who comes up with this big theory. It was Maslow and Rogers, but we'll talk about Rogers next. So you see that hierarchy of needs, the order of how your needs have to be met in order to become happy. And that top level, again, is self-actualization, where your life is challenging, it is productive, and it is meaningful. And people who are self-actualized, there's a whole list. They're self-aware, they're open, spontaneous, loving, caring. They're not paralyzed by others' opinions, meaning they do what they want without thinking about other people in terms of how they'll be judged. And someone telling them that they shouldn't do that doesn't mean that they will stop. They focus on a particular task that they often see as a mission, which is why I have the Blues Brothers there. It was their mission from God to get the band back together. Good movie if you're looking for something to watch. They're involved in a few deep relationships, not a lot of superficial ones. So think of people who have just a close-knit group of good family and friends. That doesn't mean that they're not sociable and they don't know a lot of people, but they have acquaintances and they have close connections. They don't have just everyday friends. And they're likely to have been moved by a personal peak experience that surpasses ordinary consciousness. What that means is they probably had a life-changing event that helped motivate them. Okay, so that's what Maslow says. There was a question that came up last year when I taught this. Can a bad person be self-actualized? What's interesting is if you make the argument strictly from Maslow, the argument would be no, you can't be self-actualized and a bad person, because you wouldn't be loving and caring, and you would know that you were terrible. However, if your perception is off and you think that everything you're doing is great, or you don't understand how other people are actually reacting to you, someone could feel like they're self-actualized, where their life is challenging, productive, and they feel meaningful, when in fact it is not, and they are really a terrible human being. Okay, so moving on to Rogers and the person-centered approach. So he focuses on the importance of acceptance, genuineness, empathy, all in being able to grow, meaning you have to accept yourself, you have to accept other people as they are, and you have to feel for other people in order to grow yourself. And the only way to nurture that growth within yourself is what you receive from other people as well. So you have unconditional positive regard, that attitude of total acceptance toward another person, and so you accept them as they are, faults and all. You have to be genuine, truthful in your actions and in your motivations, and you also have to be empathetic. You have to be able to share thoughts and reflect other people's feelings. You have to be able to connect with other people. When you have a therapist who's focusing on this and they're pushing the unconditional positive regard, It means they have to accept what their client, their subject, their patient is saying and doing without valuing or putting value on what is happening. So that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. It's just what is, and you have to accept it as it is. So when you look at the humanistic approach, you need to be able to assess it in terms of personality and the self perspective. It comes down to what's called the self concept. Are all your thoughts and feelings about ourselves? It's really about answering that question, who am I? So when you look at a self concept versus it's your ideal self versus your actual self, and your self concept can be positive or negative in regards to how close those two are together. So the closer reality is to the ideal, the more positive your self concept is. Someone who has an ideal of what they want, but then they don't actually act that way, has a negative self concept because they're not living up to how they feel they should be. Now, assessments can only be done with very lengthy interviews. Personality tests are too impersonal. Quick tests like BuzzFeed don't actually tell you about the person. But that is the resource we have for now. So I'm going to take a break from the lecture and I want to explain your assignment for today. So what you're going to do, it's up there, it's called self-concept analysis, is you're going to go back to that previous assignment, Who Are You, the one we did when we started the personality unit. And I want you to take your responses and analyze them for how closely they fit your self-concept. Because the reality is the question I asked you, like, if you were color, what would you be? While it is impersonal, I'm assuming most of you, most humans would respond more in vain with what their ideal was, trying to show who they are. And that might not actually be what your actual self is. So I gave my response. I had said I would be green because it was like nature, which can grow and overtake the harshest of disasters and basically renew itself over time and is able to stay strong. And then for my rating, I did like a 7. Like 1 is you, your reality is not anywhere near what your actual self is, and 10 is you're perfect. Your ideal is who you are. So I said 7 because I do believe that concept. And a lot of times when I'm in really prolonged, stressful situations, I'll be like, it's okay, this will pass, and then it'll get better. And I do that a lot. But I also don't forget when I feel that I've been wronged and I hold grudges, and even though things are much better, I can be like, oh yeah, you're the person who did that. I still hate you, even though I'm smiling right now. So I'm not like nature where it just forgives and overgrows and you don't know the disaster happened. I remember the disaster. So that's why I would put myself as a 7. And I wrote that out for you as my example. So that's what you'll do. You'll go back and you'll look at your answers. I'm not going to make you do all 5. I just want you to pick 3. So do 3 different ones you picked. And then after you've done your very short responses as to how you would rate them, look at your ratings overall and give yourself an overall self-concept. Are you ideal? You're right where you should be, an actual self, 10, or are you way off? You were just lying the whole time. Or do you have room to improve? Are you in the middle? That type of thing. Okay, so that's your assignment. If you are I think there were 2 people, because it was an easy assignment. I think there might have been 2 people who didn't do the assignment. Well, no, you got to do the assignment because this assignment is based on it. So, can't help you there. All right, so our last slide, going back to evaluate the humanistic perspective. Benefits to society. That's where you get a lot of our therapy practices, the concept of having people describe themselves and listen, and then getting positive feedback. Very common in the humanistic perspective. You've seen a lot of child rearing techniques, basically how do we raise children to be what we want them to be in terms of ideal self, and how to reinforce that as well as workplace management. How do you treat other people who work for you so that they feel that they are appreciated and their needs are met so that they themselves are able to grow? Okay. For big drawbacks, uh, so when the unconditional positive regard came out, some people interpreted that as saying you should never give criticism to children, constructive or not, because they need to feel accepted at all times. So basically, you should never tell a child no. And you can imagine how that can go wrong. Some of you may know people who were probably never told no when they were little, and now they have a very hard time dealing with that. You can have constructive criticism when you identify what's wrong with actionable suggestions. So that's real constructive criticism. If anyone's, is like, oh, I'm just, helping you out, but really they're just telling you everything that's wrong, they're not helping come up with solutions, that's not constructive criticism. If you really want to do that, you really should come to the table with a solution before you give the problem. The other drawback for the humanistic perspective is the use of vague terms. Spontaneous, loving, productive, they're all hard to define and even harder to test. If you were to come out with the overall use of the humanistic perspective on personality, there's clearly an importance on studying mental health as a whole, not just to focus on the disorders. You do have to study what makes people happy and healthy in order to help everyone. Okay, so that's it for the humanistic perspective. That one was much quicker. We already knew a lot about it, and I explained the assignment just a little while ago. So if you go to the assignment and you're not sure, you can always rewind the lecture back a little bit. And as always, you can email me with questions. All right, I will see you next class.